Imagine walking up to your childhood home, a gift in hand, your daughter by your side, only to have the door slammed in your face. Not by a stranger, but by your own mother. This isn't just a story about a party I wasn't invited to. It's about a truth my 11-year-old daughter carried in her backpack, a truth that changed everything. I didn't mean to interrupt a celebration. I was just there to drop off a gift. A small wooden music box I'd found at a local shop, painted with tiny bluebirds, chosen with care by my daughter, Lila. It was for my sister's newborn, a boy named Eli. But when my mother, Clara, opened the door of the house I'd grown up in, her face froze. Her eyes, usually warm with a practiced smile, were sharp, like I was a delivery driver who'd gotten the address wrong. "You shouldn't be here, Nora," she said, her voice flat. No trace of softness. The words landed like a slap, not because they were loud, but because they were certain. Lila's hand tightened in mine. She was 11, wearing her favorite purple sweater with a constellation of sequins across the front. I looked down at her, then past my mother into the living room. It was alive with color. Gold streamers draped across the ceiling. A banner proclaiming, "Welcome, baby Eli," in cheerful block letters, and clusters of people holding drinks and laughing. People I knew, neighbors I'd borrowed sugar from, cousins I'd played tag with as a kid, friends who'd once called me family. The chatter stopped when they noticed me, replaced by a heavy silence, the kind that makes your skin prickle. Only the faint hum of a jazz playlist kept the room from going completely still. I hadn't known there was a party. That was the knife in my chest. No text, no call, no casual mention from anyone. I'd only heard about Eli's birth a week ago, and even that came secondhand through a cousin's post on social media. I scanned the room for my sister Ava, hoping to catch her eye. She was near the dessert table, her hair swept into a bun, laughing with someone until her gaze landed on me. Her smile vanished. She looked at our mother, then away, like I was a ghost she didn't want to acknowledge. "Lila," I whispered, bending down. "Let's just leave the gift and go, okay?" My voice was steady, but inside I was crumbling. Lila nodded, but before I could move, she let go of my hand. She stepped forward, her sneakers silent on the porch, and faced my mother, with a calm I didn't recognize. "I know we're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice clear, unwavering. "That's why I brought Dad's lawyer." The words hit like a thunderclap. The room, already quiet, seemed to hold its breath. A glass clinked somewhere, but no one spoke. My mother's face drained of color, her lips parting slightly. Lila, unfazed, reached into her sparkly galaxy-themed backpack and pulled out a business card, white with gold lettering, crisp as if it had been waiting for this moment. "James Carter, family law attorney." Let me explain. James is Lila's father, my ex-husband. Our marriage ended 4 years ago, not with fireworks or betrayal, but with the slow erosion of two people who didn't fit anymore. He was consumed by his law firm. I was tired of being the only one holding our life together. But we stayed connected for Lila. James was steady, present, the kind of dad who showed up for school plays and parent-teacher conferences. When my family started pulling away after the divorce, he noticed. He didn't push, but he was there. A quiet anchor when I felt adrift. The distance from my family wasn't sudden. It started small. Group chats I was mysteriously left out of, holiday plans I learned about after the fact, birthdays where my calls went unanswered. I kept trying, sending gifts, leaving voicemails, smiling through the ache. I told myself it was temporary, that they were busy, that I was imagining the coldness. But standing on that porch, holding a music box for a nephew I hadn't met, I couldn't pretend anymore. "Lila," I whispered, my heart racing. "What are you doing?" She glanced up at me, her brown eyes steady. "I saw the messages, Mom. I know what they're doing. I just wanted them to know we're not alone." My stomach twisted. Messages? I thought I'd shielded her from the worst of it. The texts I'd glimpsed on my phone, the ones between Ava and my mother, planning this party and dismissing me with phrases like, "She won't show up anyway." Lila had seen them. My 11-year-old had carried that weight. This wasn't about a party anymore. It was about years of quiet erasure, of doors closing one by one until I was standing outside my own family. And Lila, my thoughtful, starry-eyed daughter, had decided she wouldn't let us fade away without a fight. Growing up, my family was tight-knit, or so I thought. We had traditions: Friday pizza nights, summer barbecues where everyone brought a dish, even if it was just store-bought coleslaw. Clara, my mother, was the center of it all, organized and unyielding, her love fierce but conditional. Ava was her pride, the artist, the one who could do no wrong. I was the steady one, the one who set the table, mediated arguments, and cleaned up after everyone else. I didn't mind being in the background. It felt like my role. But when I married James, things shifted. My mother adored him at first, his charm, his ambition. When we divorced, though, her warmth turned to judgment. "You should have fought harder," she told me over coffee, her voice clipped. "Families don't just break." I'd confessed that James had grown distant, that I'd felt alone even when he was in the room. She didn't flinch. "That's no reason to give up," she said, as if my pain was a choice. The exclusion began there, subtle at first. Invitations to family dinners arrived late or not at all. I'd show up to events I'd heard about through cousins, only to feel like an afterthought. I kept reaching out, especially for Lila's sake. I wanted her to know her grandparents, her aunts, her roots. But each time, the gap widened. That morning, Lila and I had been at a craft store, picking out the music box for Eli. She'd been so excited, humming as she wrapped it in silver paper. "We'll just drop it off," I'd told her, expecting a quick visit. I hadn't dressed up, no makeup, just jeans and a sweater. I wasn't there to prove anything. But as we pulled up to my mother's house, the cars lining the street, the balloons tied to the mailbox told a different story. "Is this a party?" Lila asked, her voice small. I nodded, my throat tight. "Seems like it." She clutched the gift tighter, her face unreadable. I wanted to turn around, to spare us both the humiliation, but Lila's voice stopped me. "We're here now, Mom." So we walked up the steps, and everything changed. Standing on my mother's porch, I felt the world shrink to the space between us. Clara didn't move, her hand gripping the doorframe, her pearl earrings glinting in the sunlight. The music box felt heavy in my hands, its cheerful bluebirds mocking the moment. Behind her, the party buzzed, trays of sandwiches on the counter, a cake with Eli written in blue icing, people pretending not to stare. "I didn't know about the party," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Clara shrugged, her eyes flicking to the gift. It was last minute. A lie, and we both knew it. I'd learn later that Ava had sent out email invites weeks ago, each one carefully curated, my name and Lila's conspicuously absent. The planning, the catering, the custom napkins with little storks, they weren't last minute. I started to hand her the music box. "We'll just leave this and go." But before she could take it, Lila stepped forward, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "I know we're not supposed to be here," she repeated, her voice cutting through the hum of the party. "That's why I brought Dad's lawyer." She held up James's business card, and the room froze. A cousin dropped a plate, the clatter echoing. My mother's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. I crouched beside Lila, my mind reeling. "Sweetheart, What are you talking about? She looked at me, her eyes fierce but steady. I saw the texts, Mom. The ones about the party, the ones about us. My heart sank. I'd tried to keep my phone out of sight, to shield her from the family's quiet rejection. But Lila was sharp, always had been. She noticed everything. My forced smiles when Clara didn't call back, the way I'd linger over old family photos, trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. The partygoers shifted uncomfortably. Ava, still by the cake, looked down at her shoes. My cousin Marcus, who'd always been kind, gave me a sympathetic glance, but stayed silent. My mother's voice broke the tension, sharp and cold. This is ridiculous, Nora. You're making a scene. I'm not, I said, standing up. We just came to drop off a gift. But Lila wasn't done. She looked at Clara, her grandmother, and said, You didn't want us here. You didn't even tell us. But Dad knows, and he'll make sure we're not forgotten. I wanted to scoop her up and run, to protect her from this moment, but she stood tall, her sequined sweater catching the light. I realized then that this wasn't just about the party. It was about years of being pushed out, of being told we didn't belong. Lila had seen it all, and she'd brought James's card not to start a fight, but to draw a line. My family hadn't always been this way. Growing up, our house was loud, full of laughter and chaos. Clara ran it like a conductor, assigning tasks, keeping everyone in line. Ava was the star. Her paintings hung on every wall, her dreams indulged. I was the helper, the one who made sure the table was set, the one who listened when Ava and our dad argued. I didn't mind. I loved them. But the divorce changed everything. Clara saw it as a failure, not just of my marriage, but of me. You should have stayed, she'd said when I told her James and I were separating. You don't throw away a family. I'd tried to explain that it wasn't about throwing anything away. It was about surviving. James hadn't cheated or lied. We'd just grown apart. But to Clara, that wasn't enough. She wanted me to fight for a marriage that was already gone. After that, the invitations slowed. Family dinners became small gatherings. I wasn't told about. Christmas cards stopped coming. I kept reaching out, sending gifts for Ava's birthday, calling to check in. But the responses were curt, distant. I told myself it was temporary, that they'd come around. I didn't want Lila to feel the rift, so I kept up the facade, pretending we were still part of the family. But Lila saw through it. That morning, as we drove to my mother's house, she'd been quiet, clutching the gift bag. I thought she was just excited about the music box, but now I realized she'd been planning. She'd found James's business card in my desk, seen the texts I thought I'd hidden. She'd known we were walking into something bigger than a quick drop-off as we stood on the porch. Ava finally approached, her face tight. Nora, she said, her voice low. This is a private event. Private? I echoed, my voice shaking. I'm your sister. Lila's your niece. Clara cut in, her tone sharp. It's for close family. The words hit like a punch. Close family. As if Lila and I were strangers. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to soften, to say it was a misunderstanding. She didn't. Her eyes were hard, her message clear. We weren't wanted. I took Lila's hand, the music box still in my other arm. Let's go, I said softly. I set the gift on the porch, next to the welcome mat that now felt like a lie. Lila didn't protest. She slipped her hand into mine, and we walked back to the car. The party resumed behind us, the laughter picking up as if we'd never been there. In the car, I sat for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Lila stared out the window, her backpack in her lap. I'm sorry, I said, my voice breaking. You shouldn't have had to do that. She turned to me, her eyes soft but resolute. I'm not sorry, Mom. They needed to know we're not invisible. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lila's words echoed in my head. They needed to know we're not invisible. I'd spent years pretending the distance from my family was normal, that their silence was just busyness, that their exclusion was unintentional, but it wasn't. It was deliberate, and my daughter had seen it before I did. The drive home from the party was quiet, the kind of quiet that sits heavy in your chest. Lila fell asleep in the back seat, her backpack clutched to her chest like a shield. I kept replaying the moment on the porch, my mother's words, "You shouldn't be here," and Lila's response, so calm, so sure. I was proud of her, but I was also ashamed. Ashamed that my 11-year-old had to defend us, that I'd let things get this far without seeing the truth. When we got home, I tucked Lila into bed, brushing her dark curls from her face. She stirred, her eyes half open. "Are we okay, Mom?" she asked. "We're more than okay," I said, forcing a smile. "You were so brave today." She nodded and closed her eyes, but her question lingered. Were we okay? I wasn't sure. I sat at the kitchen table, a mug of chamomile tea cooling in front of me. My phone buzzed, and I hesitated before checking it. A text from James. "Lila, told me what happened. You okay? Need me to come over?" I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering. James had always been there for Lila, but after the divorce, he'd been there for me too, in his own way. When my family started pulling away, he'd noticed, offering to talk, to help. I hadn't taken him up on it, not wanting to seem weak, but tonight I couldn't carry it alone. "Can you call?" I texted back. "I need to talk about something." 5. Minutes later, my phone rang. "What happened?" James asked, his voice steady, familiar. I told him everything. The party, the exclusion, Lila's stand with his business card. I told him about the texts Lila had seen, the ones I thought I'd hidden. "They were planning it for weeks," I said, my voice cracking. "And they didn't tell us. Not even Lila." James was quiet for a moment. "There's something else." "Isn't there?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "I think they're trying to change Grandma Rose's trust." Rose was my grandmother, Lila's great-grandmother, who'd passed away 2 years ago. She'd left a trust for Lila, a small, but meaningful fund for her education, her future. Rose had adored Lila, calling her my little comet for her bright, curious spirit. The trust was specific. Lila's name was written into it, not grandchildren or heirs, but Lila Marie Carter. I'd heard whispers from a cousin that Ava and Clara were looking into reorganizing the trust, but I'd brushed it off, not wanting to believe they'd go that far. "I had a feeling something was up," James said. "I'll look into it. I know the attorney who handled Rose's estate. If they're trying to change anything, we'll stop it." I closed my eyes, relief mixing with dread. "I don't want this to turn into a fight," I said. "I just want to protect Lila." "You're not fighting them," James said. "You're protecting what's hers. There's a difference." He was right. I'd spent so long avoiding conflict, trying to keep the peace, that I'd let my family walk over us. Lila had seen it clearly. She'd stood up to them, not with anger, but with truth. I needed to do the same. The next morning, I sat Lila down at the breakfast table. "I talked to your dad," I said. "We're going to make sure Grandma Rose's trust is safe. She left it for you because she loved you." Lila stirred her cereal, her face serious. "Are you mad I brought Dad's card?" I smiled, reaching for her hand. "No, sweetheart. You were braver than I've been in a long time." She leaned against me, her voice soft. "I just didn't want them to keep ignoring us." That day, I started taking steps. I emailed Ava and her husband, Ben, asking for clarity about the party and mentioning the trust. I kept it polite, professional, and CC'd James. I also emailed Clara, my words careful but direct. If you no longer see us as family, I'd rather hear it from you than through silence. Lila deserves better, and so do I. I didn't expect replies, and I didn't get any. The silence was louder than any argument, but it gave me clarity. For years, I'd been chasing a version of family that didn't exist, hoping for a reconciliation that would never come. Lila had seen it first. She'd refused to let us be erased. A few days later, my cousin Leah called. She'd been at the party, standing near the back, and she'd seen everything. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything," she said, her voice shaky. "I didn't know how bad it was. People were talking about the trust, Nora. They thought you wouldn't notice." Her words confirmed what I'd feared. This wasn't just about a party. It was about control, about deciding who belonged and who didn't. I thanked Leah for her honesty, but inside, I was reeling. My family had planned to rewrite Lila's future, to take away what Rose had left her, and they thought I'd stay quiet. A week passed with no word from Clara, Ava, or Ben. The silence was heavy, but it was also freeing. I'd spent so long waiting for them to see me, to include me, that I hadn't realized how much energy it took. Lila, meanwhile, was her usual self, drawing constellations on her sketch pad, humming while she did her homework. But I noticed a change in her, a quiet strength. She wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. On Thursday, my phone rang. Clara's name flashed on the screen, and my heart skipped. I answered, bracing myself. "Hello?" Her voice was sharp, no warmth. "So you're bringing lawyers into this now?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "I'm protecting Lila. That's all." "You embarrassed us," she said. "In front of everyone." I almost laughed, the absurdity hitting me. "You embarrassed me, Mom. You told me I didn't belong in my own family's home. You made Lila feel like she wasn't wanted." She didn't respond right away. When she did, her tone was defensive. "It wasn't like that. Things got complicated after Rose died. Ava and Ben were just trying to sort out the trust." "Sort it out how?" I asked. "By cutting Lila out?" She stumbled, her words vague. Something about paperwork, misunderstandings, Ava's new family. But I wasn't buying it. "We'll let the lawyer handle it," I said, my voice firm. There was a pause, then her final shot. "If this is how you want it, don't expect to be part of things going forward." The words stung, but they didn't surprise me. They were a confirmation, not a revelation. "Thanks for making it clear," I said, and hung up. The next day, James sent me an email from Rose's attorney. Ava had tried to redirect the trust to Eli, claiming it was meant for future generations. But Rose's will was ironclad. Lila's name was written explicitly, her share untouchable without my consent. They'd tried to move forward without me banking on my silence. They'd underestimated Lila. I took Lila out for ice cream that weekend, just the two of us. The shop was cozy, with fairy lights strung across the ceiling. As she scooped mint chocolate chip, she asked, "Are we still going to see Grandma?" I looked at her, my heart aching. "Do you want to?" She shrugged, licking her spoon. "Not really. She doesn't act like she wants us." I squeezed her hand. "Then that's her loss, not ours." Later, Leah texted again, saying the family was still talking about the party, about Lila's stand. Some felt guilty. Others thought I'd overreacted. But their opinions didn't matter anymore. I wasn't fighting for their approval. I was fighting for Lila, for her right to be seen, to be valued. One evening, James came over for dinner. We didn't talk about the trust or the party. Instead, we laughed about Lila's latest school project, a model of the solar system. We shared a bottle of wine, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was part of something real. After Lila went to bed, I walked James to his car. "You did good," he said, his voice soft. "With Lila, with all of this." "I don't feel like I did," I admitted. "She had to stand up for me. She shouldn't have to." He smiled. "She did it because she knows you'd do the same for her. That's what matters." He was right. Lila knew I'd fight for her, just as she'd fought for us. That was the family we'd built. Not perfect, but ours. Weeks later, a few relatives reached out, offering apologies or explanations. Clara and Ava stayed silent, and I was okay with that. Closure wasn't about their words, it was about my choice to stop chasing them. Our house felt different now, warmer, lighter. Lila and I painted her room a soft lavender, hung fairy lights, and danced to her favorite songs on Saturday mornings. One day, Lila brought home a drawing from school. 2 figures under a starry sky labeled Mom and Me. Below it, in her careful handwriting, "We are enough." I taped it to the fridge, tears in my eyes. She'd learned what took me years to understand. Family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who shows up. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt pushed out by the people who should love you most, know you're not alone. Your worth isn't up for debate. Please like, share, and comment with your own story. I'd love to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories about finding your voice and standing tall. Thank you for being here.